There is a truth that tourism never tells you. The sinful city of America is not in Las Vegas, but right in the heart of Colorado. Once praised as a land of nature and freedom, Colorado is now hiding a grim reality. Beneath the white snow and picturesque towns, thousands of homeless people are living in conditions no different from an apocalypse. No electricity, no water, no hope. Neighborhoods that were once bustling are now filled with tents and trash. People no longer talk about settling down. They only talk about how to survive today. And behind that collapse is a system that no longer has a place for the poor. In today's video, we will take you into the hidden dark side of Colorado, where nature is as beautiful as a painting, but the lives of the homeless are as harsh as a silent purge, where the American dream not only collapses, but also slowly rots beneath the cold ground. Perhaps not many people are ready to hear this, that a state once praised as a green living paradise, an ideal destination for retirees and young entrepreneurs, is gradually being submerged by a humanitarian crisis. Colorado, with its majestic Rocky Mountains, vibrant tourist towns like Aspen, and communities once dubbed the friendliest in America, is grappling with a reality that no image-promoting system can cover up. The number of homeless people is skyrocketing at an alarming rate. From Fort Collins to Pueblo, from Colorado Springs to Greeley, cities large and small across the state are witnessing a surge in the number of people without homes to return to. Especially, they are not just the marginalized as the old prejudice suggests, but also those who once contributed to building this state with their sweat, strength, and loyalty. According to the latest data from early 2025, Colorado currently has over 52,806 people experiencing homelessness, the highest level in more than a decade and a significant increase compared to the pre-pandemic period. But the true epicenter of this crisis is Denver. On the streets that were once bustling with tourists and businessmen, such as Sheridan, Broadway, the downtown area, or along the I-25 and I-70 highways, rows of grey-green tents have sprung up like a parallel city. At one point, nearly 6,000 homeless people were in Denver alone, bringing the city close to San Francisco and surpassing even Oakland, cities once notorious for having the worst homelessness in the United States. But what is most unsettling is the endless cycle. Each time the tents are cleared, just a few days later, they spring up in another place. As if the city is fighting against its own shadow. The reason is very clear. To rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Denver, you need to earn at least $32 an hour, while the common wage here is only around $6 an hour. A difference not too great, but enough to push an entire life out of a stable home. Many of them were once workers, teachers, drivers, healthcare staff, people no different from you or me, except they lacked a stroke of luck. Worse still, divisions within the community are cracking day by day. A sympathetic party believes that homeless people are victims of the system. One side is angry, thinks they brought it on themselves because they are lazy or get involved in bad things. But it's hard to point the finger at an old man huddled by the bus stop, or a mother holding her child to sleep in a car and still believe that this is just their fault. Colorado used to be a place where people came to rebuild their lives, but now it is pushing thousands of people to the ultimate limit of, not only in terms of material things, but also in terms of beliefs. The belief that if you live kindly, trying to do the right thing, America will not leave you behind. And when trust itself begins to leave its final eaves. Are you still sure that you live in a community or just a place where everyone tries to survive, but no one really sees each other? If a roof made of plastic tarpaulin was considered home, then in Denver today, even that minimal definition is being taken away. A surprise raid took place in Denver leaving 150 homeless people at a makeshift camp, awakened not by the sun, but by the sound of excavators, police sirens, and a decisive order. You must leave, right now. No advance warning. There is no alternative support or shelter. Only shock remained, and the scattered belongings of people who had nowhere else to return to. In that moment, many people fell into a state of despair, confusion, and fear. Not only because they lost temporary shelter, but because an already uncertain future is now even more unclear and uncertain. Among those affected is Alex Holt-Dash, a homeless woman who has lived at this refugee camp for more than 9 months. After an unannounced raid, everything she tried to preserve suddenly disappeared.
This has been a nightmare. I feel like I'm in prison, honestly.
She knew one day the camp would be cleaned up. But what she, and dozens of others, didn't expect was that for the first time in months, the city no longer offered any alternative shelter. All they got was an explanation from the mayor's office. There isn't enough space for all. The scene at that time did not look like a social campaign. It's like an evacuation without humanity. Memorabilia, mattresses, backpacks, family photos, sprawled in the middle of the ground and then collected like municipal waste. The only difference is, this is not trash. This is the remnant of lives that are trying to live peacefully, even though there is nothing left to lose.
Don't want this. We just want to be able to help ourselves, and we can't do that when we don't even know where we're going to spend the night.
But the story doesn't end there. A neighborhood guard near the camp said that just a few days later, dozens of homeless people began wandering into nearby neighborhoods, sitting in parks, in store backyards, in front of bus stops. No longer reserved for the homeless areas, they had become shadows in motion, with nowhere to go, and no place where they were allowed to stay. The city government is still pursuing a support program with the goal of placing 2,000 homeless people in temporary shelters. As of the latest date, nearly 1,500 people have been supported, and 90% are still living in that accommodation, for an average of 98 days. That is an encouraging signal. But there's also no denying the dark side. 132 of them went back to the streets, not because they wanted, but because the support period ended before they had a long escape. Others don't go through the complicated filing process, or simply no longer trust any system. We once called Denver a city of opportunity, of resilient Western community spirit. But when the tent roofs are wiped out, with no policy or program to replace them to help those who have lost their roofs once again, what is being removed is not just a makeshift camp, but a part of the last fragile hope left. And if those people used to have careers, had memories, had dreams, is no longer considered a worthy, has a place to return, then which of us will be next? There are cities that bring spring with them throughout the 4 seasons, like Honolulu, where warm sunshine is always present. But there are also places that spring never visits. There, only an endless winter remains, where faith gradually turns to ice and hope is as fragile as frost. Lakewood, town once known as Denver's peaceful satellite, is now gradually becoming a grey area that no one wants to talk about. Those who once chose to live here because of the peaceful atmosphere and reasonable house prices now have to witness homeless tents springing up every day, spreading like a fever that cannot cool down. What makes things hopeless is not just the growing presence of people no longer home, but the feeling no one is really responsible. The land that temporary camps are occupying is not in the city, but in the state. So even though the city receives a series of complaints from piled up waste, campfires close to trees, to stream pollution flowing into the Platte River, the answer is always, we don't have enough authority. Spring, in the memory of many Lakewood seniors, was once a peaceful time to sit and listen to the peaceful sounds of a blooming town. Now, they closed the door. They saw carts full of scraps, blank eyes, and even people quietly relieving themselves behind bushes because there was nowhere else to go.
I don't have any ill will towards them, but just the trash that they generate and the needle use and the going to the bathroom in this river, it's not good.
I don't have any ill will towards them, but just the trash that they generate and the needle use and the going to the bathroom in this river. It's not good. 145 to 156. The dream broke not because of the homeless, but because the system was so fragmented that no one took action. No one dared to admit their mistakes. Meanwhile, homeless people still live every day in the snow, on the side of the road, just a few meters away from houses with heated roofs. Cedo Teesside says they are coordinated processing. But people don't need more promises. They need a specific action. As for homeless people, they don't need another round of raids. They need a place called house. Amid all that conflict, Lakewood felt trapped in a long, never-ending winter. No one is clearly wrong. No one is completely right. Only one community was pushed to the limit, both those who had homes and those who had lost everything. When a city cannot secure a foothold for both the homeowner and the homeless, is and still the right of the American people? Colorado, which used to be considered land to start over, is now holding thousands of people in a loop they can't get out of. No home, no address, no hope. They are caught up in a strange series of adversities. If they want a house, they must have a job. If they want a job, they must have a place to live. But in between those two conditions is a social void that no one can fill. You will think that just one tent roof and determination is enough to start over. But no, when everything you own can be seized at any time, when sleep is awakened by police car horns, when you don't know where to find tomorrow to put your back, then will alone is not enough. People cannot rise when they have to use up all their energy just to survive. That's why many people, after being put in temporary shelters, and then still return to the streets, not because they want to, but because there is no next step, because all solutions are temporary. Residence is temporary, work is short-term, subsidies are full of barriers. Homeless people like dockless boats, keep drifting, keep spinning, and nowhere really welcomes them. But the biggest paradox is the look from the community. People who used to live in the house and had stable work are now subject to suspicious eyes from their old neighbours. They are seen as a danger instead of a victim. And society begins to function in a distorted way. The poor fear the poor themselves, and the conditioned fear, what reminds them that they too can fall at any time. This loop doesn't just press on the shoulders of adults. Children born in vagrancy are not considered innocent. They must learn to survive, not learn to live. They avoid the eyes of adults, bowing their heads every time they pass through. School as if being poor is a crime. And that guilt, over time, will not disappear. It just turns into simmering despair, passed from generation to generation. In a society where temporary shelter is considered a luxury, doing it all over again sounds like a fairy tale. But the tragedy is not that we lack money. It's because we lack the determination to break that cycle. Are we, who are still lucky, contributing to the loop continuing to operate? One thing that people rarely talk about when talking about the homeless crisis is that it's not just people living on the streets who are losing their roofs, but the community around them is also losing its spiritual home. Colorado used to be a place like that. A peaceful residential area where neighbors' names are known, where children used to play in the yard without anyone watching. But in recent years, that scene has been gradually cracking. Not because of natural disasters or crime, but because of something few people expected. The increasingly visible presence of homeless camps just a few steps away. Steps off the porch of each house. People here don't just witness pockets of trash piling up, waste in the backyard, or flames of fire on the lawn every night. What makes them more confused than is the feeling of helplessness. They call the city dumps it on the state. They sent petitions and received back promises, would review over and over again over the years. And so, frustration gradually builds up, not just because of insecurity, but because they are no longer heard in the very place they once called home. On the contrary, the homeless people in those camps are no different. They are looked at with watchful eyes, considered a threat, chased away, even if nothing is done wrong. They live in a sense of being watched, hated, and most of all, is excluded. Not just from the policy system, but from the very human bonds that once kept this society together. It's not hard to see the consequences. In many neighborhoods around Denver and surrounding areas, people started erecting higher fences, installing more cameras, and even cutting out park chairs so that no one would sit and sleep through the night. Those actions can bring a sense of control in the short term, but in the long term, they only deepen an increasingly wide gap. And so what was once the core of American life, community spirit, mutual trust, willingness to help people in difficulty, gradually eroded. We live in a strange age, where compassion becomes a luxury, where asking a stranger on the sidewalk makes us suspicious, and where the same people who gave away, when they fell into trouble, was considered to others. The rift in the community did not take place noisily. It happens quietly, when people stop looking at each other in their eyes, stop calling each other's names, and stop thinking that we is a collective. Of course, there are still people who try to hold on to that. Spontaneous supply parties, cold winter food handouts, who left blankets at the camp door without saying a word. But are those patches enough to retain a torn cloth? How to live in a society where we are no longer neighbors, but just strangers living side by side in fear and defense. When mentioning Colorado Springs, people often think of the towering Pikes Peak Mountains, the red brick houses interspersed among the pine forests, and the peaceful atmosphere of a city once known as the best place to retire in America. But at the present time, not everyone is lucky enough to enjoy a quiet morning with a cup of coffee. Because it's only a few neighborhoods away, spring has long been absent, giving way to temporary tents, intermittent sleep, and eyes that have never felt the warmth of safety again. Colorado Springs is not the only city facing a homeless crisis, but here, there is something special going on. A clear contrast between the two pictures. On one side are neat neighborhoods where lawns are trimmed regularly, and on the other side are empty strips of land with plastic bags flying in the wind, shopping carts filled with memories and helplessness. In the midst of that separation, there are still people trying to reconnect the fragments. A typical example is the Springs Rescue Mission program, which is not simply a shelter, but a place that brings hope. Here, homeless people are not only fed and slept warmly, but also receive recovery support, job advice, and most importantly, is treated like a person with a name, a story, have a future. Every day, hundreds of hot meals are distributed, not only to fill stomachs, but to remind them that they still belong to a certain community. Of course, Colorado Springs still has many challenges. Affordable housing is still an unsolved problem. Many homeless people are still not ready to return to the system because they have lost faith. And not everyone agrees with this dash-filled approach. But in the middle of an America that is getting used to indifference, Colorado Springs is showing another option. A choice that is not easy, not fast, not perfect, but a cloning option. Because spring doesn't come from policy, it comes from the human heart. And where the hands are still outstretched, spring can begin, even from a blanket, a meal, or a look that is no longer evasive. Maybe we can't change the whole system, but if every city like Colorado Springs chose to go a little differently, could America find the spring it lost? there are silent collapses. It wasn't the explosions, but the sound of small cracks, repeating over and over again until the foundation shattered without realizing it. And if anyone still thinks that Colorado's homeless crisis is just a risk in the future, then they probably didn't step foot down the street one winter morning in Denver, or stop in Lakewood, where trash pile up right on the side of the avenue. Colorado was once seen as a symbol of America's post-pandemic revival, where young people flocked to start businesses, where families chose to find a peaceful pace of life in the mountains and hills. But now, the very place that was once hailed as the state of hope is the one that is most revealing of the cracks in the modern social structure. Housing is too expensive, subsidies are not keeping up with prices, and welfare systems are sagging under real pressure. We are no longer talking about a wandering minority. We're talking about thousands of people, used to have jobs, used to have houses, used to be an indispensable part of this machine. They don't fall out of the system because of personal mistakes. They are pushed out by systemic decisions. A 30% increase in rents in a single year. Low-cost housing estates being demolished for new construction. A policy of cleaning up homeless camps, but no alternative accommodation. And if you ask, then where do they go? The answer is nowhere. They flood the sidewalks, vacant lots, parking lots behind supermarkets, or hide in abandoned office areas. Was once a symbol of a vibrant economy, but is now a reluctant shelter. This collapse is not in a distant scenario. It has crept into every neighborhood, every market, every job board, without enough salary to rent a room. It is present in the eyes of a mother who does not dare to take her child to school because she no longer has a valid residential address. It lurks in every budget decision when the city has to choose between cutting services or laying off public utility workers. And when the community is no longer able to care for the weakest, the collapse is no longer a homeless story, but a warning to all of us. Colorado is standing at a turn. On one side is the continuation of superficial coping policies. Just worry about keeping a clean face. On the other side is the more difficult road, requires courage, the admission of mistakes, and efforts from many quarters to rebuild from the roots. Will we collapse? And how far have we fallen? Are we brave enough to rebuild? Not just with money, but with people. Colorado was once a destination for simple dreams, is now becoming a place where dreams are left behind. Not because the people here don't try, but because a system that once boasted of being fair to all has stopped listening to the weakest voices. We can continue to glance at pictures of tents on the sidewalk, exhausted eyes under the supermarket awning, and think it's someone else's problem. But if the system can abandon people who have worked, paid taxes, and hoped for, when will it come back and abandon you? What do you think about the homeless crisis in Colorado? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and register to support the channel and update our latest videos. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. The video builds on publicly released reports, figures, and information from press sources, NGOs, and state government statistical data. All views, analyses, and arguments in the video are aimed at education, social criticism, and public awareness, not specifically at criticizing individuals, organizations, or authorities. We respect all different perspectives and encourage viewers to comment in a civilized, responsible manner.